You're listening to Hockey Talk on the Rock
All right, stop!
with Laura and Keith.
It's interesting.
So let's back up a second.
He played absolutely out of his mind.
It made no sense to me.
And now, here are your hosts.
So, we are back. Here we go. Hockey Talk on the Rock on Salt Spring Island. It is Tuesday, May the 25th. Probably around 7 o'clock tonight. And we've got some stuff to talk about. I think we're on episode 34.
Yeah.
Laura might correct me.
I think
But
that's right.
yeah, we're going to be talking about a little bit of Canucks news, and then we're going to talk about a whole bunch of playoff stuff. So right off the hop, we've got exciting Canucks news and a scoring the point for Keith on the coaching carousel.
Yeah, I was gonna say I feel like this whole episode is just gonna be I don't know anything about hockey, evidently, because I was very positive that he wasn't coming back, and then like the next day after we recorded, there was kind of a leak like, okay, there's been some positive progression, and then it was like a deal is gonna happen any day, and they still haven't released the money for him, which I think is a bit interesting, but 2-year deal for Travis Green, matches Bennings. 2 years left on his contract. I think for both of them, they realistically have a year. And if things don't improve, then they'll probably both be gone. But I, again, could 100% be wrong because I think that's what this episode's theme is. But yeah, I'm happy for Travis Green. I don't think the Canucks would have gotten a better coach for this group. And with who's available out there, I guess. So for me, good job for them. We'll see what happens to the rest of the coaching staff now.
Yeah, I mean, we would have to think the writing's on the wall now that Benning was waiting to extend Green because he wasn't certain if he was coming back.
Yeah.
And now that we know, unfortunately, that he is, that he was able to make that move, and it probably sucked for Travis to have to wait as long as he did. But,
yeah, I have a lot of respect for Travis Green. I think, like, for me, it really shows how committed he is to this team and to Vancouver, like, as a city, because I think it must have been tempting for him to have gone through the season that he did in the position that he was in to just be like, screw you guys, I want to at least see what else is out there, right? But the fact that he didn't, to me, you know, shows how committed he is to that group, so I really like that. Obviously.
yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. Is it just shows that he obviously has a good connection with the team and the players and their growth and everything like that. So yeah, like you say, it earns him a lot of respect in the committed to the work he's put in already kind of thing.
And I'm sure for the players too, right? Like the ones that are returning, they like that because there was kind of rumors at the beginning of this year, and I don't know how true they were when the Canucks looked awful, and you know, we both questioned like, are they tuning out the coach? And some people suggested that they weren't listening to him because they weren't sure if he was going to be back next year, so they kind of tuned him out. So if that was a problem, then hopefully this erases that for next year. Yeah.
Yeah, and I forgot off the top, I wanted to mention that it's exciting for us that this is going to probably be our last Zoom episode.
Yeah, really exciting news. So
yeah, anyone not in BC, we got exciting news, and we're allowed to see each other in person again. So we'll be back doing live episodes together in person, either here at the cabin or somewhere.
Yeah.
Somewhere.
Yeah.
Anyways, staying with the coaching and the Canucks, there was lots of media interviews from the players, and Travis Green and Jim Benning gave a lot of awful sound bites as he normally does. Made me really nervous / bothered when he made this comment to Sportsnet 650, the People Show, on the Friday, I think it was, about, you know, he's going to have conversations with goaltending coach Ian Clark, and he wants to bring him back, but, you know, there's other good goaltending coaches out there, you know. And that comment was like, you didn't need to say that if you're negotiating with somebody, for one. And two, it kind of makes me think and wonder, like, apparently Ian Clark's, he walks to his own beat of his own drum, right?
Yeah.
So maybe he doesn't exactly get along with Benning. And you know, maybe there's a little bit of, you know, personal relationship that isn't great, and maybe that's why Benning put that comment out there to kind of, like, you know, forewarn the people, basically, like,
this
I
might
don't really like this guy, and maybe I'm gonna find someone else anyway.
Yeah, and I think too, like with what has been happening in the playoffs recently, and we'll touch on it a bit later, but like, I mentioned I thought that Philly would be a really good landing spot for Ian Clark if he doesn't stay in Vancouver last week. But the other one that I think is really obvious is Florida, where they have Bobrovsky, who they're paying, $10 million to right now to not even play. And he worked with Ian Clark before in Columbus, and that was when he had his best season. So if I'm Florida and they let Clark walk, that would be like the first person I would call, right?
Yeah.
And it could be that Ian Clark also just realizes that he's in a really good position where there's going to be a lot of teams that want his services and he can probably make whatever he wants and work with whoever he wants. So, yeah, like I'm crossing my fingers because, again, we talked about it last week, right? They invested in Demko and he looked like he really turned a corner working with Clark in like the last year and a half now, or a year. I guess it's only been a year, but it just feels like a year and a half. Like since the bubble, right? When you really started to see like, okay, Demko's got something here. And we talked about it before, like Markstrom had that moment too working with Clark where he didn't look great for a while and then something clicked. And I do think that comes down to coaching. But honestly, right now, like last week, I said I was like 99% sure he was leaving. After last week of Green resigning, I think maybe there's a chance. I heard that the Canucks kind of have left it with him now. Like they've given their pitch, they've given their offer, and then we'll see what he says, kind of thing. So, yeah.
I myself, I'm gonna bet it's about a 50-50 thing that he's back. I'm gonna hope that it's kind of a Green thing where he has such a good relationship with Holtby and Demko that he just wants to be back, and that kind of works out in the Canucks' favor.
Yeah.
But I was gonna throw out the Florida thing as well, but I'll throw out another one I was thinking of too. Was the Big Apple in New York?
Yeah.
They've got those two young goalies in Shesterkin and Georgiev who already show to be, naturally pretty talented if they got a good goaltending coach. I'm not saying that they don't have a good one now, but
Yeah.
Ian Clark's pretty highly regarded. They might be willing to throw some money at him too, and that's a destination place to live as well.
That's true, for sure. I could see that one. Yeah, and kind of, I guess, moving on from that comment to the other comment that made me very nervous that Benning said last week in his end of season kind of press conference there. About, first of all, that they're going to explore buyouts, which is good. And it sounds like ownership is going to give them the money to do the buyouts. But that is really just Benning getting out of his own mess. It's not really progressing the team any further. And then he went on further to say, like, they're tied together, that he wanted to add veteran leadership to this group and that he wanted to have 3 scoring lines. And again, this kind of ties into Edmonton, but we'll get there. But you look at that team, which I think is a cautionary tale for the Canucks, like 100% cautionary tale for the Canucks. But they're going to be looking for veteran scoring this summer as well. There's going to be a bunch, and that, as we've seen in years past, is going to drive, the price of those free agents up. And we know that Jimbo, he's ready to sign, he's ready to go with term and with money. So my fear is that he gets rid of a couple of those contracts through buyouts or deals with Seattle or whatever. And then he just stabs himself in the foot again with some other dumb contracts.
Yeah, I mean, I'm hoping that he works hard on the trade front and the teams that are in tight expansion and cap situations. I mean, you've probably read a little bit about what's going on out there already, and I mean, the 3 names that I saw come up that are most interesting that are rumored already, even though we're not even really close to the off season, are one because they're local, one because of the cap crunch, and one's a combination of both. Sorry.
Right.
So the first one's Nugent Hopkins.
Yeah.
Myself can't see it. I think he is destined to be on Edmonton because they're going to pay him because they have no one else, and I can't see him to come to Vancouver. I mean, I guess he could be a winger for Bo, but like they would have to pay him more than Bo's getting to make him third line center, which would be weird.
I agree with you in half. I don't see the money working out in Vancouver at all. Just not with the contracts that they have to sign this summer. But I personally would love him to be a third, like have kind of him and Bo as like a second A and a second B line centers behind Pedersen, and then move him up onto the power play for to get him basically points. But I think Nuge at this point in his career could be really good for that, and that would get you those 3 lines of scoring. But I don't think it works with the fit, because I think the rumor out of Edmonton was like he wanted like 7 million or something, and he's not getting that in Vancouver. I don't think he goes back to Edmonton though, and I think it's partially because of what happened last night.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I agree. Part of me thinks he will stay because they'll pay, but I
Okay.
was hearing today that they offered him a good deal before the season started, and now they've gone back and they've offered less.
Okay.
So, yeah, I mean, he's like a Taylor Hall and a Jordan Eberle. Like he's been around for nearly a decade, and he's won one playoff round with them. So you can see, hey, I'm 27 or 28,
Yeah.
and my first kick at the can at free agency here. Let's see what's out there at least.
Yeah, and I think there'll be teams, right? Like he reminds me a lot kind of like a Johansson / Duchesne at this stage of his career, where like if he's with other players, he can produce and he can do okay, but he cannot be the player that drives his own line. And that's the part for me, like that I'd be freaked out with him in free agency if I was going after him as a team, but there'll be teams that will go for him because he's a center.
I'll throw in a wild card as Colorado might go for him.
I could see Colorado for sure, and I think that would be a really good fit, as everything Colorado does seems to be. But yeah, I could see that.
So the next name that was out there was local connection, and because of the crunch, and that's coming out of Toronto, and they're talking about Alex Kerfoot.
Well, Alex Kerfoot right now looks really freaking good.
He does look good. Out of the 3, he's the least appetizing to me, but like he would fill that exact 3C role that the Canucks need, and they could probably get him out of Toronto
For cheap.
at a small price because of the expansion draft.
Yeah.
And then the third one that I read was the expansion cap casualty in Tampa. Being Anthony Cirelli is being suggested might be on the move.
I like that, but I think anyone you get out of Tampa is gonna be good. So, like.
Yeah. So do you think they'd be able to get him without overpaying like they did for Miller?
I mean, I don't know, right? Like Jim, he just gives me so little faith in anything he does. You'd think they would, because of the cap situation that Tampa's going to be in. It's going to be worse than what it was when they got Miller, right? Like, if Kucherov and everyone is healthy next year, they need to shed like $8 million or something. Like, it's a crazy amount. So I feel like the answer there is it should be, except for the fact that I think they'll be smart with the expansion draft, and they'll probably dump, contracts to Seattle for something. So, I mean, that's the one for me that I'd be the most excited about out of those 3, because of age and because you probably don't have to give up too much. The person, and this is not a rumor, this is literally just a me thing, that I would be kind of interested in the Canucks going after. And he had a terrible year this year. And I think you could probably get him for quite cheap, except his contract isn't great. And that is Max Domi. And the only reason why I say this is because, again, you can probably get him for pretty cheap, and he's got the connection with Bo, and the Canucks seem to do deals that Bo likes.
Right.
So it'll be interesting, and if you move him on the wing, you play him, with him and Pearson or whatever, and see how it goes. See if you can rekindle that junior magic, but I don't know. Like, I would probably prefer Cirelli, obviously. And I mean, that's the really interesting thing about the Canucks this season, right? Is like, yes, they have quite a lot of cap space. They should be able to make more because of those buyouts. But they've got a lot of holes in their lineup. Yes, they could bring back Sutter, but at this point in his career, he shouldn't be more than your 4th line center. And I think the Canucks have proven over the past few years that if he's your 3rd line center, you cannot produce offense with that group.
Yeah.
They need to upgrade that. 3rd line center is going to cost you something, either in terms of a trade or in terms of like dollars. So it'll be very fascinating. And then the defense is a whole nother issue that I won't get into. But the other thing, yeah, like with the expansion draft is there's going to be tons of teams that are in trouble. The Canucks are not in trouble. Like they could add a player, they should go after a player here. They should be smart about this. Someone's going to be willing to give up someone kind of good for not very much.
Yeah, no, I'm really excited for what's going to happen when the playoffs end because I feel like not as many teams are going to make direct deals with Seattle as they did with Vegas.
Yeah.
And I feel like you're going to see a little bit of fan dangling behind the scenes with other teams, and I'm really excited to see who capitalizes and who goes where because like there's going to be movement. I feel like.
Yeah, I think so as well, and because of the flat cap, right? Like even that, it's going to be very interesting to see what happens come July, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's my Canuck talk for the week, I think.
Very good. Me too. So from there, we'll start to talk into like current events.
Okay.
And I think we'll stay in one series and we'll start with Colorado, but I think we'll start with Nazem Kadri first.
Okay.
So for those who have been living under a rock, Nazem Kadri got suspended again in the playoffs. Shocking, I know. Third time in the last 4 times he's been in the playoffs. Basically, the reason Toronto traded him, he was a well-behaved boy for Colorado last year. This year, classic Kadri reared his head, 8 games. Thoughts?
Okay, so I have a few thoughts. I mean, obviously that hit was awful. Like out of all the suspensions that we've talked about in the past little while, that's the one for me that I look at. I'm like, yeah, 100% suspendable. Don't like the hit. I do think it's funny that Kadri seems to be the only player that ever gets like the appropriate number of games.
Yeah.
It seems like everyone else gets less, even if they're repeat offenders. And then Kadri's like, nope, you're getting the full thing. So I do think that's kind of funny. Props to Colorado because after he was suspended, they looked just as good, which shows, as we talked about, right, the depth of that team. He has evidently now like appealed the suspension, so we'll see what happens there. But I think 8 games is stiff, but I think it was probably the right call.
I think so too. I mean, if he hadn't had such a history, especially in the playoffs,
Yeah.
So the appeal's gonna go through in 2 days on Thursday.
Yeah.
To decide, and then if it holds up, he still has the ability to appeal it once more to an independent arbitrator because he's just appealing to the NHL right now. And I mean, if I was him, I'd probably do the same thing. So you're just sitting around suspended anyway.
Yeah. Why not try? Right.
For me, best case scenario, I could see them knocking a game, maybe 2 off.
Yeah.
I would not be surprised if they upheld it.
Yeah, I think the NHL will uphold it or appeal it or whatever, and I'm not sure. I think it will go to the next level, and maybe 2.
And I'd even predict that because he's appealing it, Gary Bettman would tack on an extra game even. So moving on to the series itself from the Kadri suspension.
Yes.
Colorado wrapped up the series. They swept St. Louis. They looked incredibly dominant. I mean, St. Louis didn't look very good, but Colorado's a good team. So what do we have here in our little bracket thing? You picked Colorado in 6, so you got the point for Colorado. They got business taken care of quicker, I think, than most people would have against St. Louis.
Yeah, and I mean, this is what we talked about earlier, but like St. Louis had a number of issues. I think the first thing that I saw in that series personally was that I think they missed Pietrangelo more than they expected defensively, because while they have good other defensemen on that team, it's not the same as Pietrangelo, and I think he's kind of shown that here. His basically in the playoffs, his all-around ability, and so that was my first thought. Second thought is Jordan Binnington is a complete mess. That series to me was like, if I'm a St. Louis fan, that's the final straw in my like Binnington fandom, which I don't have anyone. I don't like him. His stats in this series were obviously 0 wins. He had a 3.59 goals against average and a .899 save percentage. Meanwhile, he's trying to fight Grubauer. He's just like, I don't know. He's hot-headed and it doesn't work. Like, it doesn't work. And if I'm a St. Louis fan, I want change. And I know it's not going to happen. So this is my bold prediction for St. Louis. I think that after the season ends, they bring back Yarrow Halak.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, because I think that could work. You get a guy that could play, right? Like they were screwed in this series. They couldn't put in their backup,
Right.
Huso or whatever. So they had to keep playing Binnington. They kept going to him, and he just lost it. Now, that's disregarding the other part of their problem, which was they also didn't have any offense. And yeah, they probably could pursue some trade-off like options there, but they do have a lot of younger guys who are probably going to get better. And I think St. Louis is really interesting as a team because I like a lot of their pieces, but they need to work out the defense and Binnington. Or again, another place you could maybe see Ian Clark going, although I can't see him working with Binnington personally. So
No, I couldn't see that, but I got two takes on what you said there, and I think my predictions for St. Louis, because I agree they've got to change up a few things, is in the offseason I can see them trading Braden Shen,
yeah,
mainly for futures, because like you say, I think they've got good young guys who are looking for expanded roles, and he's, I wouldn't say plateaued might be the right word, you know? He's not getting better, he's not really getting worse, but he's not great.
yeah, he didn't have a great end to the season.
Yeah, so he still got value though. So
Oh
this might
yeah,
be time, and their GM has shown that he's willing to move on from guys before they're,
yeah,
TJ for example.
yeah.
Anyways, the other thing I think is St. Louis is going to be opportunistic in the expansion draft stuff with the goalies, and I
Right.
don't think it's going to be Halak. I feel like Halak has shown this year in Boston that he's slowed down and he got bypassed by Swayman and the other goalie who I can't think of right now.
Yeah.
So I think there's other options going to be out there. Maybe they swing a deal with Florida for Dreger.
We'll get into that one later.
But there's multiple teams, the Rangers, as I mentioned before, but I don't think they have to protect Shesterkin.
No.
Anyways, there's teams
They're
with
fine.
multiple goalies that I think that goalies are going to be interesting this offseason.
Yeah. And I don't really have any thoughts on Colorado. They just had a completely dominant performance, like from start to finish, right? And
Yeah, no,
they
they're
look
well.
like they're plugged in and they're ready to compete.
They stay healthy for sure. Next series that we were going to talk about, Boston. I don't have much to say on the Boston-Washington series. I got a point. Boston took out Washington in 5 games. I picked them to 6. Like when we were doing our bracket, we kind of said that I think this is the easy pick on this side of the page because Boston was the hottest team in the second half. They were playing really well, and they did bring in Lazar and Hall at the deadline, and they were fitting in really well. Also, so yeah, I guess I'm surprised they did it in 5 and not 6 because I picked 6, but they looked really good, and Washington has a few goals to fill.
Yeah, so Washington to me is the interesting one here. Like Boston, I think, is in a really good position because whoever wins that Islanders Pittsburgh series, I kind of like Boston's play. Like I like how they match up with both those teams, although I guess the Islanders could completely shut them out as possible, but um I don't know. I just think they've got a chance here to go a little on another deep run, which is unfortunate because I dislike them. But Washington is fascinating because of Ovechkin, and like I I think it's highly unlikely he goes anywhere else. But I do think if you're him and this season ended the way it did, and there's the problems that are starting to poke up with this team, maybe you consider looking at what your other options are. And it's always been rumored that he's either gonna retire and go to the KHL or he'll just finish his career as a cap. So again, I say it's highly unlikely, but maybe he, pokes his head around.
Yeah, okay. For Washington, yeah, they've got to do a little bit of a culture change, and I think we've talked about it, but I think Kuznetsov is going to get moved this offseason.
Yeah.
And I'd throw it out there. I think I might have thrown it out there to you before, but my prediction is with the shakeup coming in Calgary, I can kind of see Monahan in a second going for Kuznetsov, and I think it'd be good for Monahan to be a second C in Washington behind Backstrom, and I think Kuznetsov would I don't know. That's the iffy part. I don't know if he would be a good number one guy in Calgary, but maybe just the fact that he's getting traded out of town might be what he needs.
Yeah, I think, right, if you're Calgary, like if you're tree living, you got to be smart if you're moving on from either one of Monahan or Gaudreau, because you can't sell them for picks because of the position you've put this team in, right? Like last summer, you went out, you bought, and they have good pieces there. But if you want to change up your culture, I don't know if bringing Kuznetsov is the right move. I know I said Gaudreau for him, but yeah, it would be. I mean, he's talented, right? Like he definitely has the talent. It's just if he wants to be a part of the team or not. I also wonder with Washington about Samsonov. Again, kind of similar stuff, but also his playoffs weren't great. And it looked like, I think we all know that Holtby is not the goalie that he was before, but I don't think Washington's figured out their goaltending situation either. Like, I think their best goalie this playoffs was Craig Anderson, which is saying something when, he's 41 or whatever.
Yeah.
So, yeah, interesting. Definitely predictable series, I would say. And we'll see what happens from here with that team.
And like you say, they match up well in the next round. So, I agree with you. I think I can easily see Boston in the Final Four.
Yeah.
So final series and the most exciting one, as I'm wearing the Jets jersey here. Last night, the Jets wrapped up a surprising sweep of the Edmonton Oilers, and I think it brings us both great joy. Not just because I got a point on the bracket, but because it's always kind of fun to see Edmonton fail after getting all those first overall picks year after year after year. So I had Winnipeg in 6. Winnipeg took them out in 4 straight. I enjoyed it. It was awesome to see. Winnipeg looks deep as hell, and going into the playoffs, I said to you the two things that are going to cost Edmonton in that series are depth and goaltending. No problem sitting here saying I was wrong about goaltending because Mike Smith played really, really well.
Yeah, it wasn't Mike Smith's fault.
But it was the depth. And I was sitting there last night watching the overtimes, and I think it was the second overtime that Dave Tippett only played his first 2 lines and his first defense lines for the whole period. And I went, there's no way. There's no way they can win this doing that. There's no way. And then I thought it was quite humorous that Ethan Bear's first shift since they tied the game in the third period was the one they won on. You know?
Yeah, so like I have so many thoughts about this series, and it also brings me like an unimaginable amount of joy watching Edmonton like get swept. I guess like for me, the first thing here is like, if you'd never watched hockey before in your life and you hear like the whole saying like, oh, playoff hockey is different than regular season hockey, and you don't believe it, this is the series that you have to watch, because I'm just going to rattle off some stats. I looked it all up. So when you look at the Jets record from March to May, so like the second half of the series, they were exactly a 500 hockey team. 17 wins, 17 losses, and 2 overtime losses. From April to May last month, they were under 500, so 8 wins, 10 losses. Their record versus the Oilers, they had 2 wins and 7 losses, okay? So I'm seeing all this stuff before going in, and I was like, yeah, there's no way, like there's just no way, especially with how McDavid has played this year. Number one thing about the Oilers, if you get them to put McDavid and Draisaitl on the same line, you've already won. Yeah, they can't be on the same line. You can have that team kind of built in that way, but you have to split those two up, because both those guys can basically carry whoever else you put on their line with them. Once you put them together, like, what is the rest of their lineup? Like, it was like their second line was like RNH with Cassian, and I don't even know who the other winger was, but like, they're not going to get it done. Then you have the thing, like, I'm going to get into Winnipeg in a second, because I feel like I'm massively underestimated Winnipeg twice this year, once at the beginning of the year and once at the beginning of the playoffs. Halfway through the season, I was like, you know what? I could see Winnipeg like coming out of the North, and then they had like this crappy end to the season, and I was like, man, they look like they hate each other. They look like they hate playing hockey. Like this team is just fragile. I'm going to be really, really excited to watch the next round because it's going to be really interesting to see what Winnipeg does. But I'm not going to bet against them anymore. They've won me over. I think there's something there. And kind of overall in this whole playoffs, I think the thing that we're seeing is like goaltending really does matter. So like, Hellebuck was really good. Mike Smith was really good. He just wasn't as good as Hellebuck in that series. And then kind of my final thing about the Oilers that I guess I kind of might have some sympathy with that franchise about, which is not very much, but I do think like the Jets got away with a lot on McDavid, which happens every playoffs, and McDavid's going to have to find a way to fight through that. It's on him, right? But he didn't draw a single penalty in the series, which I do think is a bit alarming. And like last night when I was watching, there was a couple times when he literally got like tackled or kneed and there was no call. And if I'm an Oilers fan, I'm pissed off. But as a Canucks fan who's been through that like 9 million times and just heard the same thing, oh, that's playoff hockey, you got to learn to live with it, he is going to have to figure out a way to play in those series. This is year 6 now of McDavid in Edmonton. They've made the playoffs twice, literally 2 times. He's won 1 playoff round. Is exactly the same as the Canucks core that came in quite a bit later than McDavid and Draisaitl. And on top of that, sorry, I told you I had a lot to say about this one. Like for me last year watching the play-in with Chicago, I was like, yeah, I could see Chicago beating Edmonton. Like I saw it there. And this year I'm like, there's no way they let it happen again. And then they do. I will go on to say this. I don't think McDavid asks for a trade yet. I think that because of the cap space that Edmonton has, he's going to give him 1 more year. He's going to say, okay, show me what you got. What can you do with this group? Tyson Barrie's another one I could go on about because I think last night was like a prime example of why you can't give that guy a bunch of money. He can't play defense.
No.
But they need to figure out a way to insulate that team with other players. It's going to be hard for them though because as you said, like Nugent Hopkins probably gone and he's by far he's their 3rd best player by a lot on that team. And like you're going to have to replace him with someone.
Yeah, they've got trouble. Like, did Kyle Turris play this series?
He did, but he wasn't noticeable, right?
Right. So yeah, I mean, I heard someone say today, I was like, that's so bang on. It was like there was players that looked good because they were playing on the Draisaitl McDavid line, like Yamamoto or Puljujarvi or whatever. But as soon as you put them on another line, they were invisible. Like, and just seeing some of the names that were rotating on the lines with them last night, it was like Devin Shore and Tyler Ennis, and like what is going on with this team? And then it showed their roster later, and I was like, oh man, like Chris Russell and Slater Cuckoo and like what? And Mike Smith's a UFA, and they still have Koskinen for 1 more year at how much? $4.5 million.
Yeah, something stupid. Yeah.
Oh my goodness! Like it's like, yes, they have a lot of money.
Yeah.
It's a weak free agent class this summer.
Yeah.
Oh man, I think you're right. I think McDavid gives them 1 year, and then if next year does not go well,
yeah,
I'd want out too.
It's fascinating to think about a McDavid trade because if you kept Draisaitl, you're the Oilers and you kept Draisaitl, and you trade McDavid, you could probably get enough pieces to work around Draisaitl being your number 1 player on that team.
I've been thinking about that though, and like, how much of Draisaitl is McDavid driven?
It's so hard to tell, and I've thought a lot about that too.
It's really hard to tell.
I think last year he did prove that he could shoulder the load like with the team when McDavid went down, but it wasn't for a full season. So
right.
Again, I don't know. Like I don't know how much of it is McDavid. They do normally play on separate lines and he does normally produce, except they also play together on the power play. So again, really hard to tell.
And 3-on-3 overtime. I don't know how many times I've seen those two end the game together in overtime.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, moving on from Edmonton, Winnipeg looked really good. I don't have too much to say about them. I agree with you. I'm super excited to see them in the next round.
Yeah.
I think it's obviously going to be Toronto, but you never know. And I think Toronto has surprised me. I'm not going
Yeah.
to say much about Toronto, but they've surprised me with their depth since Tavares went down. I thought that was going to be a really, like, way more noticeably impactful.
Yeah.
But they've done really, really well. And so I'm so excited for a Toronto Winnipeg series. Man,
I
think
hope
that
it's good. Like, right, like this is the thing, and I'm gonna say this because Tavares is out, and it's not only Tavares, right? Like Foligno also has missed a couple games now, and like that second line could have been a disaster with it being like Kerfoot, Galchenyuk, and Nylander, but they've been like the best players for Toronto, which is very,
really well together.
very impressive when you consider like what it could have been, because I think we all agree like a Tavares, Nylander, Foligno line looks a lot better as your second line than what they're putting out there. But I think it's gonna be a long series, a Toronto Winnipeg one, and I think that we're gonna finally get to know if Jack Campbell is actually a legitimate number one goalie. Because if I'm a Leafs fan, I still don't know.
Well, it's hard to say because they showed the stat, and since I think 2011, the Canadians have averaged less than 2 goals a game scored with Carey Price in the playoffs. So, like, Price is playing quite well, way better than he played the regular season.
Yeah, he's been
But
impressive.
when they can't score,
No,
that's not all Jack Campbell. I don't think.
no, I think it's definitely in part by Montreal. And Montreal was one of those teams too that was super hyped up at the beginning of this year, and they were hyped up for their depth up front, and they do have a lot of good pieces, but they're missing the star power. And it's very apparent when you put them up against Toronto, who I don't think their best players have been that great. Like, they've been good, but I don't think like Matthews and Marner have been like that amazing yet. It's literally just depth beating Montreal right now.
Yeah.
So they've been impressive. Toronto's impressed me a lot. I don't like them as a team either, but props, respect must be given. So
Yeah, and I mean, it's a good segue from us to go from Winnipeg to Toronto to talk about the Tavares injury, because that did happen since the last time we talked. And it was a horrific sight where he twisted his knee at a collision with the blue line. Then on the way down, he took a knee directly to the face from Corey Perry, and it knocked him out cold. And it was an ugly sight. From what I've read, his knee injury would have kept him out 2 weeks. The concussion, you never know with these things.
Yeah.
I don't think he has a big concussion history, luckily for him. So maybe, you never know. His head could clear up around the same time as knee does, which would be great for Toronto.
Yeah.
But it was scary, and the only thing that I really didn't like was that it was Corey Perry. I don't think he did it purposely. I think it all happened way too fast for him to intently do anything there. But just the fact it was him, it kind of bugs.
It made you think. Yeah, I think the other thing with Corey Perry too is that they've like a lot of focus has been on the fact that him and Tavares are actually pretty good buddies, like off the ice. And he was pretty freaked out when he saw Tavares down the way he was. I don't think it was on purpose, but again, it's Corey Perry, you never know. That was one of the worst things I've ever seen. Like, I did not like watching it when Tavares started falling backwards. And for me, it goes into being in a Canese class like years ago when we talked about this lacrosse player who broke basically the bone in your spinal cord that keeps your head on so it doesn't sink through your neck, basically. And he tried to sit up, and his trainer was like, no, like, don't sit up. And for some reason, when Tavares tried sitting up, that was like the first thought I had. I'm like, oh my God, we're going to watch this guy die. Like, I just clicked into that, and I was like, okay, no, it's not that injury. He's okay. But I really didn't like watching his reaction. I was pretty scared for him. And it's, I thought that the rest of that game was pretty boring from both sides. Like, Montreal wound up winning, but after that game, Toronto has looked very like, they've got a plan. They want to make it through this round, and they want to do it for him. So, yeah.
So hopefully he recovers sooner than later.
Yeah.
Johnny Tavares.
If he comes back.
good for hockey kind of guy. So
Yeah.
that's all I've got on the playoff stuff so far. I'm up on you 2-1. Neither of us have got games correct in the series that are over, and
I think it's about to get a lot worse for me. I'm just throwing that out there. I'm not very confident. Oh,
well, I'm confident in the Toronto series.
yeah.
Nashville, Carolina, you might steal one from me from with Nashville. You never know.
You never know. They're up 2-1 right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For
Can
me,
I just quickly talk about the Florida series?
Yes. Yeah. I know you love that Battle of Florida.
Yeah, so this has been by far like my favorite series to watch, and I think I told you before or earlier that this year I think has been the first time I've been able to watch the playoffs and not really care who wins. Like there are teams that I like more than other teams because they have certain players I like or whatever, but I've kind of just been able to enjoy the hockey. And the Florida series to me has been by far the most exciting. Again, going into the fact that I think this whole playoffs is kind of showing that goaltending does matter. We've seen Florida now use 3 goalies. Bobrovsky has looked awful. Drieger has also looked awful. And the comment that I'll make about him, and I don't know because I didn't watch a lot of Florida games during the regular season, if this is like a normal thing for him, but what I found watching him is when he moves across the net, he makes himself smaller. And to me, that's a big red flag. And I could see, like, they're going to have to trade him, right? Or they're going to lose him to Seattle, one or the two. And I could see Edmonton making a play for him and it not working out well for Edmonton. I could just see that being a very Ken Holland move. But Vasilevsky for Tampa hasn't been his normal self either. And I think that this series could have been a lot better, basically, if Florida got like 2 more saves. But my prediction of all predictions is that Spencer Knight is going to win again tomorrow, and then he'll lose Game 7 like Demko did against Vegas.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
So
I
think it goes 7 because of that, but I think they probably should have played Spencer Knight earlier. And yeah, it's been fun to watch. There's a lot of hatred there, a lot of goals.
Yeah, it's a good story for Spencer Knight. It is pretty interesting that they've used 3 goalies in the series. And I will just throw at you on the vein of typical Ken Holland type move. I was actually going to throw at you later in time that I can see him throwing money and bringing Jonathan Bernier up there from Detroit.
Okay, I could see that too. You're right.
I feel like that would be a very Ken Holland thing to do, and that also not going very well for them.
Yeah, and the other thing I wanted to say is that Tampa looks really freaking good. Like again, outside of I think that Vasilevsky's been a bit shaky compared to how he was like last year during the playoffs. They look like a very legit team, and I think that it also hurts Florida in this series. Like, first of all, not having Ekblad, but then in addition, the fact that Tampa got Savard and Florida was like heavily rumored to be interested in him, right? I think that also hurts them. And then this is on a totally different side note. The other interesting thing is that Florida's been using a 5-forward power play.
Oh, really?
Yeah, which is pretty fascinating because like you don't normally see that in the NHL. Mind you, Barkov is so good defensively, it probably is like the equivalent of having like Yandel out there or something. But it's interesting to see. So
Philly's toyed with the 5-forward power play a few times over the last few years.
Yeah.
Mainly because, just like in Barkov, since they put Kevin Hayes on that point, and he's pretty good defensively at least.
Right.
Final random note for you that I forgot to bring up with Washington is: did you know that this was the 3rd consecutive first-round loss for them since they won the Cup?
I did.
I didn't know that until I read that today, and I thought, huh, I bet they probably don't think too hard, or maybe they. I wonder how they feel now about doing the Brana for Mantha trade.
Yeah, and also like they remind me a lot, except for the fact that they won the Cup, of the 2011 Canucks. Like, the Canucks made the playoffs, like I think it was 3 years after, and got kicked out in the first round every time. And to me, it seems like that team, like the writing's on the wall, and that they're getting old, right?
Yeah.
And again, like you said, Verano was one of their players that was young and fit well with that core. I mean, I think Anthony Mouth is a great player too. I just think they gave up too much basically to get him.
Mhm.
And yeah, like comes down to Ovechkin. I don't know.
Alrighty. Well, do you have any final notes for the week or the episode, I suppose?
I don't think so. I guess I have two other kind of Canuck things that I forgot to throw at you
Okay.
during our who are they gonna acquire, who's a hometown boy, and the other one that's out there is Sam Reinhart from
Oh, I
Buffalo.
did hear about Sam Reinhart a little bit.
Yeah, and so evidently he wants to come home. I don't know how much of this is actually true, right? It's just people connect it to the Canucks because he's from the area or whatever. And
Reinhardt's an RFA though, right?
he is, but I don't think he wants to stay in Buffalo.
Yeah, no, I'm just thinking it would cost Vancouver both a lot of money to re-sign him and probably quite a bit to acquire him.
Yeah, like I would love, like I think Sam Reinhart would probably be a very good fit in the Canucks top six. He's played really well on a very bad Buffalo team, so like I don't have a problem with that, but it is what's the price and then what's his dollars. So
Yeah.
I'm not crazy about that, but if you were gonna, this is my final Canuck point prediction of the day.
All right.
Okay, is what old veterans could you see Jimbo bringing into the fold?
No.
Because I have two,
Off the top,
possibly three.
off the top of my head, right away, I'm like, oh man, I can totally see him overpaying Eric Stahl. I don't know why that's the name that first came to my head.
Yeah,
I don't see Stahl wanting to do it.
no.
Oh, I don't like thinking about this. What do you got?
Well, my first thought was Kyle Turris, which I know we laughed about earlier, but to me, he's like that veteran leadership. He's from BC, and
But
I
he's
could
on a 3-year deal with Edmonton, is he not?
no. Is it 3 years? I thought it was just one.
I was pretty sure they did a 3-year deal with him.
Oh God, that's awful.
Yeah, I'll look it up when you give me the other two.
Okay, the other one is someone from Montreal. Like I could see him going after one of their UFAs, and I'm trying to think of who they are now. Let's see. I mean, like Philip Deneau would be pretty sweet if they could get him as their third line center, but I don't see that happening either.
Meet in the middle. It was a 2-year deal for
Okay.
Turris. He is on Edmonton for 1 more year.
Yeah, I could see them maybe trying to go after like a Corey Perry or like a someone like that that's old and is one.
Right.
So
In the
maybe
making.
not Turris, I guess. That was my first thought. So I'm happy that he's longer than that.
Me too. You're thinking someone in the vein of like a Jason Spezza kind of thing.
Yeah. Like
Right.
what they've done in Toronto and be like, see, we can do that in Vancouver too, but not have the same success.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a good question. I don't got much for you. I'll ponder it and I'll come back to you on this one.
Okay, sounds good. I'll do some more thinking on that one too. But yeah.
Alrighty. Well, I think that was a good episode, and we'll call it a wrap on episode 34. So thanks for listening, and we will be back. But next time we will be actually not on Zoom, so that'll be fun, and the first time since November. And so
Yeah, I'm excited. Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Until next time.